Hi, welcome to my channel. This is Amber Rain Davis from NotableInk.com. I'm thrilled to be participating in Altenew's December 2018 Build a Flower Poppy blog hop. We're going to be adding some hand-drawn details to this card today, so let's go ahead and get started. As I said, we'll be using the Build a Flower Poppy stamp set. I absolutely love poppies. I live in Southern California, and that's our state flower. So let's go ahead and get started. I've gone ahead and stamped the two large floral images onto some yellow cardstock here. And I'm taking Versamark ink and stamping the second layer to each of these stamps on there. That's going to give me a tone-on-tone shadow. If I were using darker cardstock, that would show up in a much darker, with a much darker effect. However, because this cardstock is light, you can't see it very well, but I could see it in person, and it's helping to guide these hand-drawn lines that I'm adding here. So in addition to being a card maker, I also am a certified Zentangle teacher, and with that, Zentangle is all about adding repeating patterns. So while these hand-drawn accents aren't necessarily Zentangle, I'm using some of the same principles. So this principle is called Aura, A-U-R-A, and that's really just to mimic an existing line. So I'm using a Sakura Pigma Micron pen, and this is the PN version. If you have a tendency to use a lot of pressure when you're drawing, this is a fantastic pen. It has a plastic nib versus their kind of fine points that they have on their other pens that crush very easily if you use a lot of pressure. So I really like this particular version of their Micron pens. So what I'm doing is I'm using the pen and I'm mimicking both the lines of the stamps and also the Versamark shadow that I have there. It is really important when you do this technique that your lines need to follow the curve of the petal. That's going to give you a more realistic look. If you were to go in a different direction, it wouldn't look quite right. So make sure that you follow the line there. So you'll see that some areas will become much darker. So when your insertion point or the end of your line starts to overlap each other, you're going to get a lot of ink buildup in that area, and it's going to cause some automatic shadows. So you can see that right there in that crease. And that is a great look. So I definitely want to continue that throughout these petals. So instead of kind of coming down with the tip of the pen in a separate place each time, you're going to see me kind of group them together and go into one insertion point to get a dark area there, and then I'll spread them out at the base so that I have some variation. Or you may see that I don't do a complete line from top to bottom. I'll kind of stop it midway or a third of the way down and insert it into the previous line again so that I can get some darker contrast with those lines and some shadowing. You can also go back and add some additional lines when you're done drawing your lines here. You can add some additional shadowing just like that. So I'm darkening up underneath the curve of that petal there. So that petal is folded over, so it is going to be darker underneath there. That folded petal is going to cast a shadow onto the rest of the petal. So we'll keep adding some additional lines here, again going with that curve. And so you can see at the base how that collection of ink just adds that really nice shadow to the base. And this is sped up, I want to say this is 6 times faster than what I drew it. So when you're drawing your lines, you do want to take your time and figure out whether or not it's easier for you to draw away from yourself or towards yourself. You can see in most cases I'm pulling the pen towards myself, and I tend to get a cleaner, smoother line that way, but it's different for each person. There I'm going away. And be sure to turn your paper as often as you need to so that you're going in a direction that's easiest. Here I'm adding some dots to add some contrast to the center of the flower. So I'm taking Altenew Jet Black ink spray here, and I'm kind of flicked off as much of the ink as I could into the bottle, and then I flicked it onto my paper. Here I'm using some, I want to say I know it's the Altenew watercolors. I want to say it's Fresh Citrus. That might be the color. And then the white ink spray. And I'm just splattering all of that onto an A2 sized card panel. Next, I felt like I loved all the shadowing that the ink added, but it still looked pretty flat to me. So I'm going to add some additional yellow color with some Copic markers. So I'm using Y13 and Y18, and then I will actually bring in a third color that's a little bit more orange to get some deeper contrast. But really I'm just reinforcing where I have that darker shading with the Pigma ink already. I'm also making sure, so poppy flowers, if you've seen them, are very veiny and kind of crepey. They have a wrinkly texture to them. And so they generally have like little dips in the petals at the top. So I'm making sure to add contrast not only to the base of the petal, but also to the tips where there might be a crease. So here you can see I have a YR02, and I'm just adding a light orange in there. I didn't want anything too drastic, but I like how the variation of the yellows and that light orange adds some nice texture and just interest to the overall flowers. So I'm going to color all 3 flowers the same way, and then I do color the stem with the same colors. So here I'm going to stamp, I'm going to white heat emboss my sentiment. You can see that I did one already up top, but I didn't like the spacing on it once I trimmed it. So we'll go ahead and white heat emboss that. Make sure that you have your heat tool. I usually will start heating it up before I put on my embossing powder. That way there's less warping to the cardstock. So here it's such a small little piece that I'm trying to get it lined up. I'm using my jewel picker tool, hoping I could hold it with that. That wasn't really working. So I'm just going to go ahead and tape it down so that it doesn't shift. And then I'll partially trim it because I'm going to hand trim out the word joy so that that pops up. But I wanted the amount of cardstock above and below the rest of the sentiment to be equal. I didn't want there to be more space on top than there was on the bottom. So the joy will hang over, that'll be a nice accent as well. Sorry that my fussy cutting is off screen there. So I'm going to get rid of the other one. I'm going to just do some arranging here. I'm getting off the, I had some white powder on there. And so here's my inked panel that's nice and dry already. So I'm just figuring out my layouts. I've added foam tape to that strip, and I've got the bottom of my card panel lined up with my craft mat. I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch border at the bottom, and then I'm just going to eyeball the space in between the 3 strips of black cardstock. Excuse my hair there. And then we'll go ahead and get our flowers arranged. And I'm just adding foam tape to the back of these. I want to make sure that there's enough underneath there to support it, so I'm just trying to figure out where exactly I need it. I end up taking, I think, 2 of those bottom pieces off because the strip is already has foam tape on it. So I don't need it on the stem or on the very bottom edge of that top flower. I don't know about you guys, but I spend a good amount of time figuring out how I want to arrange flowers and sequins, all those things. It takes me a little bit of time. So for this flower, I didn't want it completely popped up. I wanted it to be more recessed. So the top flower, the large flower on the bottom right are popped up, and this flower on the bottom only has foam tape on the piece that overhangs. Here's a close-up of it so you can see the dimension. As always, products are listed in the video description below. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any other videos in this series. I also have a white lined version in red and craft paper. I'll put links at the end of this video so you can check that out as well. You can also find me on Instagram at Notable Ink and Facebook at Notable Ink also. Thank you so much for stopping by and have a fantastic day.